Welcome to the Heart and Soul Wellness Podcast, where we inspire women by teaching applicable skills and tools and assisting them with connecting with one another, healing, and aspiring to their highest selves so they can reach their full potential. Hi, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to be with you today. I'm so excited for today's podcast. We have Natalie Broekman with us, and she's amazing. She is the Associate Head Coach for BYU Gymnastics. So today we're going to be talking about the art of recovering from setbacks. And I'm just so honored to have her with us today, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. So Natalie Broekman is the Associate Head Coach for BYU Gymnastics. She has been working in this capacity since 2015, and her primary role is to coach balance beam. Prior to working at BYU, she coached at the gym level under Olympian Amanda Borgen at gold medal gymnastics. Gymnastics has always been a passion for Natalie, who grew up competing at the national level and was a member of the U.S. Women's National Gymnastics team from 1992 to 1994. After high school, she accepted a scholarship to compete for Brigham Young University, where she was named an All-American on balance beam, served as a team captain, and helped her team with multiple berths at NCAA National Championship. Her favorite part of coaching is building relationships with the young adults she works with and helping them to find growth and confidence and resilience that perhaps they didn't know they could have. Natalie has a degree in family science and PE coaching from BYU. Her biggest supporter is her husband, Dave, and her greatest joy is being a mother to Davis, Brady, Holland, and Tate. She is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She loves traveling, spending time with her family and dog, and feels like she is living out her dream as a college coach. That is so awesome. Some awesome accomplishments.
Thank you.
Very cool. So tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you to coaching.
Yeah. I grew up in Arizona. I started doing gymnastics as a little girl and went up and competed through the elite level into my high school years. And like you mentioned, I was part of the U.S. national team and had lots of really cool experiences, training and competing for the U.S. national team. I feel like when I tell people I was in gymnastics, they're always super interested in that part of my life. Although as a kid, I felt like that didn't really totally define me. My parents were really good about helping me have balance and identities in other ways as well. So it was a huge part of my life, and eventually led me to BYU, where I accepted a scholarship and competed here for 4 years. And now I'm here coaching. When I was finished with competing, I was married at the time, young married, finished school with my husband, and we moved back to Arizona, where I started coaching club gymnastics. And I did that for, it was pretty limited. I started when I had little tiny kids, maybe 2 days a week in the gym, just to keep my foot in what I was passionate about. And as my kids got older, I did more and more. And then about 7 years ago, BYU hired me to come back and be an assistant coach. And now I'm working in the capacity as associate head coach here. And my primary responsibility, like you said, is in coaching balance beam. So I really love it. I love working with this age group, and just kind of getting to be a mentor to young women of this age who are kind of at a place in their life where they're trying to figure out what they know about themselves, where they're confident, what they're not confident in, and just helping them kind of use gymnastics to learn life lessons. So that's my job. It's a pretty cool job.
That is awesome. Tell me more about gymnastics and life lessons and how that shows up for you in coaching.
Yeah, I mean, gymnastics is an interesting sport. And at the college level, we work at a very perfectionistic level. Our girls have a lot of expectation on them. It seems like every single day in practice, I'm working with girls on their thoughts. I do more mind work than I do physical coaching work. Just helping them to manage their expectations, letting them know what our expectations are, teaching them to give themselves grace, and helping them find the mental fortitude to kind of do what we expect of them. And that just includes overcoming a lot of things and persevering through a lot of things. So that's sort of the sport in and of itself. And I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I imagine with all of your accomplishments, that's something that I would imagine, had to practice and persevere in and master as well. So tell me just a little bit about how you've worked through that. Some of the, like when you said some of the mind work that comes along with competing and improving and getting better, and how you found balance between grace and also doing your very best. Yeah.
Like I mentioned, this is a really perfectionistic sport. And so you hear, like in gymnastics, the perfect 10, right? Like that's the ultimate. And that's what we're after. And there's just very, very little room for error in that. And there's also a lot of pressure accompanied with doing this sport, just being individually perfect, but then also at the college level, being part of a team where there are expectations from your teammates, there are expectations from your coaches to perform at this kind of perfectionistic level. And everyone's counting on you. Your scholarship may be on the line, depending on your performance. And that would include your gymnastics performance, as well as academic performance and social performance, and all these things that we're looking at as they're members of our team. So I actually, with my girls, like acknowledging that those are very high expectations. And I like to be able to empathize with them because I have been through it and I have felt it before, that's just a lot to carry on their shoulders. Add to that gymnastics is kind of a negative sport. And actually the head coach that I work under, Gard Young, he kind of explains it like this. He's like, every other sport that you might engage in, when you step on the field or the court, your job is to acquire points. And so, you do what you do so that you can get points, and eventually those points turn into winning. But in gymnastics, and not very many other sports are like this, when you step on the floor, you're starting from a perfect 10, and everything you do diminishes that. And so it can be kind of a negative place unless you have the right frame of mind, because at every turn, somebody is judging you, somebody is critiquing you, somebody is taking away points as you perform and you're trying to do your best. And so it can be a little bit overwhelming. And I think for our girls, mistakes, even very, very small ones at this level, they equate that to losing. That any mistake they make leads to losing. And so at some level, the fear of doing something that might cause your team to lose is very real for my athletes. And so my favorite part of my job, I think, is just to prepare them mentally and physically to overcome that fear, and to prepare them so well that the likelihood of success is higher, but also so that they learn how to handle that perfectionism that exists within the sport. And one of my favorite things to say to my team is just that the best beam workers in the whole wide world, and they know who those people are. I just say those people, those very, very, very best in the whole wide world, are not perfect. They are adaptable. And so if I can teach them to be adaptable, then I feel like I've done my job, because guess what? None of us are perfect. And I feel like that can, just that element of being resilient and adaptable, is something that as women, like in any realm, we can relate to that, right? Because we're not going to do it all right all the time. So if they can start learning that now, just through the sport of gymnastics, then I feel like I'm giving them a life lesson that is going to go with them.
Absolutely. The resilience is so key, and persevering is so key in being able to manage some of the challenges that we experience. Tell me more about how you help them with managing the fear of failure. That I think everyone deals with this on some level, this fear that I'm going to fail or I'm not going to be successful. And then how you manage it with some of the girls when there is a failure and then they need to bounce back from it.
Yeah. One of the things is that we spend a huge chunk of our year in a practice gym. Very, very little of what we do is actually out on the competition floor. So, 9 months a year, we're practicing, building strength, building composition of routines, doing all these things. And then you get those few 13 moments where you get to be on the floor competing. And I try to talk to them about this as a practice gym, which means you're going to fail, right? You're going to take turns that aren't perfect and that aren't your very, very best yet. But that's okay because we're in a practice gym and this is where we practice and this is where we learn. And I think like you could take that into life. Like you date a boy and he just turns out to be a loser. Guess what? That was a practice date. You're not going to be with him forever. You get to practice and you get to decide what your behavior is going to be in that relationship. And you get to decide how you're going to change that. As it pertains to gymnastics, we had a performance strength coach, a mental performance strength coach who worked with our team. His name was Craig Manning. He is incredible. And he would talk to our girls about using a 2-to-1 method. And so anytime they do anything, and it could be the smallest turn, they just, do one dismount off the beam. They can very quickly in their own brain feel that it wasn't perfect because they've been doing this a long time. And they have a choice at that point to talk to themselves in a certain way. So they can either say, man, that sucked. Man, that was awful, right? I'm terrible at this. Or what his encouragement was to use this 2-to-1 method and find 2 things that were good about that turn. What did you do well? I kicked my leg hard. I stood up tall on my punch for the dismount. And then what is one thing that you want to change in your next turn? And I think that just puts them in a mindset then of I can be critical, but it doesn't have to be negative. I can be, I can react to what I just did and I can evaluate it, but I don't have to be caught in this cycle of, well, it wasn't good enough. And so now I'm fearful that I'm not good enough and that that I'm letting my team down and that my coaches are disappointed in me and that I'm not going to make a lineup or that I'm going to lose my scholarship or all the things that their minds could go to. Yeah. Instead, they're working in a proactive way of saying, this is what I'm doing well, and this is what I can change on the next turn. So one of the other things that I have thought about with that is just that there are good ways to make mistakes. And again, like this could be applied to anything outside of gymnastics as well. But one thing I say within the sport is go big. Like if you're going to miss going really big. And that takes a little bit of courage to say, I'm going to go big, but I might miss, but at least I went big for it. I didn't hold back. I wasn't cautious. And you could say that in your work. You could say that in the way that you mother, right? Like my kids might still turn around and talk back to me or be idiots, but I'm going big. I'm going to do what is true to me. And like one example I could say with gymnastics is on dismounts, for example. I always tell them, like, they're always trying to be so perfect and go for that perfect stick and don't move your feet. But sometimes when they start to do that, they go careful because they're trying so hard before they've ever completed the skill to find that finish. And I tell them all the time, take the hop, but make sure that you went big enough that the hop is in the right direction. Make sure that you go big and take the 0.5 deduction, but you did the skill the right way. And
I love that.
So that's one thing I use kind of to like get them out of this fear place in their head is just, courage, go big. Don't be afraid of that.
I love it. It sounds like you really encourage them to be brave and fully show up to whatever it is they're doing. And I love how we can apply that to life too, because, if we take that risk, but we do it in a way where we're proud of what we're doing, even if we make a mistake, so what, really? Like, we did it, and then we can come back and improve the next time. But if we never try, then we never know. And then we're not testing ourselves and improving.
Yeah. My mom used to say, did anybody die? No.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
I love that.
No, I just messed up. And like, she's another great example of me of when I was little tiny and competing, and I would be going to these meets, and to me, they were a big deal. I mean, to her, it's like, a 7-year-old gymnastics meet. So nothing that I could have done there would have disappointed her or made her feel like, wow, I have a loser of a daughter. Right. But she used to tell me, if you try your best, then we get to have a chocolate milkshake after this. And I just always felt like it's not really about the results. It's just about the effort that you put in. And I think like when we talk about resilience, sometimes there's this element of like exhaustion, or it's too hard to overcome. But if you break it into littler pieces, it's not as exhausting. And so I'm trying to think of maybe an example. So our girls have to be resilient physically, and they have to be resilient mentally, and they have to be resilient emotionally, right? And so they're overcoming things almost at every turn. So I'm thinking of like an example of them physically being resilient. They come in and they train 4 hours a day. They're up at the crack of dawn doing weights and conditioning. They're going to school. They're doing study hall. They're trying to date and have social lives. They're doing like all the things, right? And so I think most women can relate to that. Like, we're just all trying to do all the things, and it is exhausting. And still, we have to show up every day, whether we're exhausted or not. And so do our girls. They have to show up in that practice gym day after day and do it, because there's a lot on the line. And so I think like being resilient physically looks like, the way that I approach that with them is, are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough rest? Are you fueling yourself the right way? Are you meeting with the trainer to take care of your injuries? And are you proactive with good nutrition and rehab? And then there's this resilience that they have to come up with mentally and emotionally on top of that. And usually when they're physically exhausted, that's when the mental exhaustion kicks in too. And so exhaustion in these areas is real. And I have a story about that. One of my girls, she was one of our best performers here ever. Her name is Shannon Hortman Evans. And she came over to Beam one day. It was the end of practice. It was her last event. And she literally like laid down on the mat and curled up in a ball and like was 100% physically spent. And I just looked at her and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get a workout out of her. Like, she still has 40 minutes of Beam to complete and a job to get done here. And she literally was just like, I'm done. I'm finished. And I think like women, we can relate to that, where we just want to like crawl in our bed and be like, I'm done. I can't do anymore today. Right. And so there was just like no energy, nothing left in the tank. And I walked over to her and I just said, you can do this, Shannon. And she kind of looked at me like, I don't know if you know what you're talking about. Yeah. And I was like, no, you can do this. And we taught, and we use this principle a lot of 200%. So I said, remember, like when you are physically spent and maybe emotionally spent, maybe you broke up with your boyfriend last night, or you failed a chemistry test earlier today, or you've just got a lot on your plate and you can't deal. That is when you have to go into this 200% mode mentally. And you're going to will your body to do what it needs to do today by giving 200% here. It's not going to be physical at this point because you don't have anything left to give physically. I can see that. And it was so interesting because it's one of the most productive workouts I've ever seen happen because she bought into that idea. And she got up and she did this workout and she left the gym with her knuckles dragging. Like she was so spent, but she was resilient because she had a mindset that she was like, okay, my energy output, like what I give to each push through my legs, what I do with my arms, I'm going to do it all 200%. Like it's easy to say, give 100%, but if you're saying give 200%, like give more than you think you can give on every turn, then that works. And what I've learned is that our minds are so much more capable of helping our bodies do what they need to do when we just bring that like focus. And so a lot of times my girls see me bring my hands together like this, like now is where we focus, right? I understand you failed your chemistry test today. I understand you're bringing that with you into the gym, but right now we focus. And that has been a key to helping my girls just be resilient and rise above. And, you know, can you like imagine the confidence that Shannon left that workout with?
Wow. It's awesome.
You know,
that's incredible.
Because now she knows her mind is in control of everything else that happens. And it doesn't mean that everything going on around her is easier. It just means that she can be in charge of how she's going to walk into that situation. So that was really a defining moment for she and I in our relationship and for her as an athlete to figure out like, I can do things I didn't know I could do just because I'm choosing to be resilient right now.
I love that story because we can really choose how we're going to show up. We can't choose the circumstances. Sometimes we really are at that wall where it's like, got nothing left to give. But when I'm hearing you share the story, it really is like she decided in her mind what she was going to do. She chose it. And then actions followed, you know, as she made that choice.
Yeah.
I really love that because I think we can relate that to life and that we don't always have control over what happens in our life, but we do have control over how we're choosing to show up and how we're choosing to, what we're choosing to focus on.
Yeah.
So tell me more about how you've seen that, like how that shift in focus or attention has helped your girls. Like, for example, if there's big life things happening for them or other things are going on, you know, which can really, really set us back. But how you've seen your girls recover when there are these things by shifting focus and attention to what's happening in the present.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes they are big things happening in their lives. Sometimes it's the dog died last night or my grandma is in hospital or, you know, these things that are weighing on them emotionally. And sometimes they are just little mistakes, but our girls make those big things. Those are big things to them. So I think I work with them a lot on bouncing back from mistakes because, again, like we're all going to make them, right? And it goes back to we don't have to be perfect, but we have to be able to adapt. And we talk about a lot with our team, every 10th counts. So you might get up and you might do a skill and you might lose that focus for a minute or not be able to muster up 200% in that moment. And you might have a mistake, but then what do you do with it from there is a really important concept because the routine goes on, right? The meet goes on. You may still have another event to compete. And so overcoming those mistakes is almost harder for them, the little things, than dealing with the big things in life. Because sometimes I feel like they can leave those big things outside the gym. And sometimes they bring them with them. And we say, like, go put it outside the doors, right? Use this as your playground. Let your mind breathe for a second. Not have to handle that and just do gymnastics. But sometimes it's the little things in the gym, the little mistakes that they're working to overcome so hard and they're putting so much of themselves into it. And maybe it's happening and maybe it's not. Maybe they're not improving. And that's really hard for them. So one of the things I teach is be proactive and be ready. So if you know that you're like, for example, if they're in a skill and they know it's going poorly, they know that they're off, right? how can they be proactive and ready instead of giving up or shutting down? And I think, like, here's an example, and maybe you'll understand what I'm talking about or not, because I'll use a specific skill. So there's a skill on beam that's an aerial. It's a side aerial. It's a cartwheel without any hands. And so I have one girl that is pretty good at these, but from time to time, she loses that focus and she doesn't use correct technique. And she can feel as soon as she's left the beam and she's in the air that it's going to be off. And she's got to she's either going to fall off the beam or she's going to adapt and be ready. And so often what she's gotten better at over the years, as a freshman, she was terrible at this, but now she's a senior. What she's gotten better at is knowing I'm off and how do I adapt? And so she has figured out if she pulls her arms, she's going to be able to get back in line with the beam. I have another girl who does a dismount off of beam, and she knows if she leaves the beam in this position, she's going to come down and land in this position. But so often, if she doesn't have that focus and she does not go in 200% up here, she won't kick hard enough and she leaves the beam in this position, which means she's going to come up on her landing short too. And so when she takes off in this position, a lot of times I see her make that adaptation in the air, and she will start to pull her shoulders stronger, or she will, just as she comes down into the floor, instead of being here where she should be, she's coming up short. I see her engage her quads and be ready for the landing. And it's still not perfect. She still doesn't get that perfect landing, but by just engaging and being ready, she can minimize the effect of what happens on the landing. So instead of taking a great big hop or 2/10 step, she can take a 1/2 hop and finish without leaving the impression that she made this big mistake. So those are just like some examples of if we look at the mistake, but we are in this mindset of like adapt and be ready instead of, oh my gosh, I'm failing, then it's going to end better for us. And so that's what I'm just trying to teach, is just be adaptable, figure out like in that moment, what do I need to do? And I think like, I use that in my own life, right? Like in relationships, I'm having this conversation with someone and all of a sudden I'm offended or whatever. Am I adapting? Am I being ready to like confront and to deal with it? Or am I just shutting down and now my life is awful and she's terrible, and it can become a spiral really quick. And so
absolutely,
I think that's a little bit of a life lesson that they can take with them. Like, listen, every 10 counts. It may not be perfect. This relationship may not have started perfect. We may have had some miscommunication, whatever. But if I'm willing to like be engaged and be like adaptable, then it's going to end better than if I just shut down or get mad or give up.
No, that's right. Absolutely. I love that. Let me ask you one more question. We talked about this a little bit, but I just would love to come back to it, is the balance between giving ourselves grace and giving ourselves grace, but then also doing our best. And you've had a lot of practice with yourself figuring this out as a coach, but then you also teach it. And so I'm just wondering how you think this can apply to life and how we can recover from setbacks by giving ourselves grace and then also giving ourselves to show up 100%, the best that we can.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, huh?
And in saying all of this, I in no way want to imply that I'm doing it well, because like I think about myself as a mother, I do not give myself a lot of grace, right? Yeah. I'm like, I am failing. This is awful, or how could my kid be like that? Whatever. So I think one of the things that I would say is just that we have to be careful how we talk to ourselves. And when I see my girls starting to shut down and getting upset at themselves and they have these high expectations that I appreciate so much. I'd way rather coach somebody who has really high expectations of themselves than someone who doesn't.
Sorry.
But, oh, bless you. But with having those high expectations, we have to be careful how we talk to ourselves. And I will say to my girls sometimes, would you say that to your teammate? Mm-hmm. So, they'll take a turn that isn't great and they'll go, oh, it sucks. Or I'm the worst, whatever they're saying. Or I can even tell that they're thinking it. And I'll just look right at them and say, would you ever say that to her? And they're like, no. You're like, you would never watch your teammate take a turn and be like, you suck, or that was awful, or you just wouldn't do that. And so that to me is like giving yourself a little bit of grace. Like, talk to yourself like you would talk to your teammate. Tell them it's going to be okay. The next one will be better. You'll make the correction. As a mother, tomorrow will be a new day. You'll handle yourself mm-hmm. a little better. You'll learn from this. I've had experiences as a mom where I'm really disappointed in myself, how I handled my kids and how I reacted. And then I have to really get on my knees and pray about it and mm-hmm. decide that the next day I'm not going to bring that with me. I'm just going to try to be better. And the next time I'm in that heated situation, I'm just going to try to do it different. Right. And that's it. Like, that's grace to me, is just the chance to try again and not hold over our heads what has happened in the past.
I love that. How has your faith supported you and supports your girls with being able to apply grace and also apply the big picture of like, sometimes we have to surrender things that are outside of our control. And sometimes we need to show up fully and then just really allow things to happen, Yeah.
I think I'm 45. I'm just learning like how to really apply grace in my life. Yeah. So my expectation that they'll be able to do it right now as 18-year-olds, I have to be careful about, but I coach members of my own faith. I coach members of other faiths. I always try to bring it back to God will help you, number one. Yeah. Like when you're laying on the floor curled up and you don't know how you're going to get through the beam assignment, guess what? A prayer can help. So just teaching them to turn to God, ask for that. I shared a scripture just yesterday with my team, and I won't quote it, but it's Luke 9, verse 62. And it talks about how anyone who, I think it says, takes hold of the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God. And it resonated with me because I thought, that's what we do. We go to work every day. We take hold of the plow. We've got a lot to do. We've got high expectations to meet. But if we look back, then we're not fit. We're not going to progress. We have to keep that like looking forward mentality. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really easy as women to look back and to define ourselves by our mistakes and by yesterday. And it's really hard to look forward and say, I'm going to make those changes and they won't be perfect, but they're going to be good attempts. I'm going to be in the practice gym. I'm going to keep pushing forward. I'm going to keep grabbing that plow and looking forward instead of behind me. That to me is grace. And so, my girls are going to have days where they've trained and gotten to the level where they can compete for me. And that's a very high level. And they may still go up and make mistakes. And guess what? That mistake doesn't define them. Yeah. Tomorrow defines them. I tell them all the time, I'm an All-American on beam. And I fell on beam my senior night at BYU. And I don't look at that as a sad thing. I think that I'm pretty thankful for that experience because it taught me, guess what? I'm still a good person. Like here I am today. I'm coaching beam. I'm having a great life. I've got good kids. I love my job. And that moment didn't define me. Kind of like my mom, talked about with the chocolate milkshakes, like whatever happens in this meet is not going to define you. You're just going to take hold of the plow and keep moving forward tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I love that because you came back stronger. There's a lot that you've been able to accomplish. And, if you were to just say, I'm done, the outcome would be so different. And so I love this idea that when we make mistakes, we can actually just look at it as like, okay, what can I learn from this experience? Apply it to our learning and then just move forward. And it sounds like you've done a beautiful job of that.
Well, thanks. I don't know if I do it in all the areas of my life so well, but I do think some of it has to do with just how I define myself too. And just that I think my primary identity is a daughter of God. And so anything else falls behind that. So being an All-American beam worker falls behind that. Being the perfect coach falls behind that. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to do things that are not how someone else wishes I would have done them. But in the end, those things don't define me. If I'm giving my best effort, if I'm being accountable to the people and to God that love me and are cheering me on, then that's all that really matters. And I think that's what I try to help my girls feel kind of as their coach. Like I'm your cheerleader here. I'm not just the one who's deciding if you get to stay on scholarship or if you're going to compete for me again next weekend. But like, I'm the one watching you go through the muck and the mud of the everyday, and it's hard, and you're making mistakes and I'm making mistakes. And then in the end, we're all going to be okay.
Yes.
If we can kind of keep that perspective, right? If we can just keep looking forward and keep that perspective, then that's helpful.
What inspires you on your hardest day? Like on a day where you're feeling like you're curling on the ground and not sure how you're going to get back up. What inspires you to continue to move forward?
Honestly, the answer to that is probably relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a relationship person. So, when like the gymnastics has gone bad or the meeting with the head coach hasn't gone well or whatever, and you think, why am I doing this? The real answer for me is that it's the relationships. It's kind of what are these girls going to leave here in 4 years with? What have they learned from me? What have they learned through this sport? And so you just kind of keep showing up because that's what you do. Yeah, that's what we do. Right. And I think like, I think back to the years when my kids were little tiny, and I felt that a lot. Like, I just want to curl up and go to bed and not be doing this today. The reason that moms keep getting up is because they have little ones who need them, and there's a relationship and there's a love there. Right. And so I guess it really all kind of goes back to just that for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. And we've learned so much from you. And I love this topic because we can learn so much about ourselves too in this process of self-discovery as we learn to give ourselves grace and find the balance between grace and just moving forward with the best that we can. So, yeah.
I really appreciate talking to you. I'm not an expert, but I do love that aspect of my job. And it's really been a fun journey to kind of learn these things and, just keep pushing forward, right?
Keep moving forward. That's all we can do, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Heart and Soul Wellness podcast with your host, Sarah Carter. Make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any thoughts about what we talked about today, leave a comment. Also, you can find us at heartandsoulwellness.org and on Facebook and Instagram. Join us again as we continue to help women heal, connect, and aspire to their true and authentic selves.